The tension didn't disappear when the conversation moved on, it lingered in the studio like a low electrical hum. Even as another host attempted to redirect the discussion, the audience's attention kept drifting back to the exchange they had just witnessed. Greg sat quietly now, hands folded, his expression neutral. Joy, meanwhile, adjusted her glasses and straightened her notes, as if grounding herself in familiar ritual might restore the balance. The producer's voice crackled faintly through the earpiece, urging momentum, urging flow. Live television waits for no one. The next topic was introduced, lighter on the surface, but the earlier moment had shifted the dynamic at the table. Words were chosen more carefully. Jokes landed softer. Everyone seemed aware that something unscripted had happened, something that couldn't be edited out later. Joy tried to reclaim the rhythm. She jumped in quickly, offering commentary with her trademark sharpness, but there was a noticeable change. Where she had once spoken with sweeping certainty, now she added qualifiers. In my opinion, from my perspective, small phrases, but meaningful ones. Greg noticed, though he didn't react. He simply listened, the way he always did, letting others speak themselves into clarity or contradiction. The audience followed every exchange closely. Some nodded along with Joy, appreciative of her experience and confidence. Others watched Greg, waiting to see if he would jump back in. The cameras occasionally cut to him, catching the slightest raise of an eyebrow or half-smile, visual cues that suggested thought rather than confrontation. When the conversation circled back, inevitably, to the idea of accountability, Joy couldn't help herself. She returned to the earlier theme, restating her belief that public figures should be held to the highest standards. Her voice regained some of its strength as she spoke, and the audience responded with applause. It was familiar ground, safe ground. Greg leaned forward again, slowly this time, as if testing the temperature of the room before stepping in. The applause faded. Joy noticed his movement and paused, mid-thought, giving him space. There was a brief moment of mutual acknowledgement, two veterans of television recognizing that another exchange was about to unfold. I want to ask something, Greg said, calmly. Not to argue, but to understand. That phrasing disarmed the room. Even Joy nodded, signaling she was willing to engage. Greg spoke about how outrage cycles worked, how selective focus could distort conversations. He didn't name sides, didn't point fingers. Instead, he described patterns, how audiences were trained to excuse behavior from voices they trusted while condemning the same behavior from voices they didn't. As he spoke, the studio audience grew quieter, the kind of quiet that signals people are thinking rather than waiting to clap. Greg referenced media moments broadly, not singling Joy out directly, but the connection was clear. The earlier exchange had primed everyone to see the throwline. Joy responded more thoughtfully this time. She acknowledged that media ecosystems could reinforce bias, that everyone, including herself, operated within bubbles. It was a rare moment of concession, and the audience reacted with respectful applause. For a second, it seemed like the tension might dissolve into mutual understanding. But then Joy added a caveat. She argued that intent mattered, that some people deserved more scrutiny because their influence caused greater harm. Her tone sharpened again, just enough to reopen the door Greg had carefully closed. And who decides that? Greg asked gently. The question wasn't loud or accusatory, but it hung in the air. Joy hesitated. She gestured with her hands, searching for the right phrasing, talking about journalists, about public discourse, about moral responsibility. Her answer was passionate, but less precise than before. Greg nodded, acknowledging her concern. Then he spoke about how easily moral certainty could turn into blind spots. He reminded the table that most people believed they were acting in good faith, even when they contradicted themselves. Hypocrisy, he suggested, wasn't always intentional, it was often invisible to the person committing it. That framing shifted the mood again. The word, hypocrisy, had been sharp earlier, now it sounded almost reflective. Joy leaned back, listening instead of interrupting. The other hosts watched silently, sensing the gravity of the moment. The audience reaction was split, but engaged. Some clapped at Greg's points, others at Joy's rebuttals. There was no clear winner, no knockout moment, just an unfolding conversation that felt unusually real for daytime television. As the segment clock ticked down, the moderator stepped in to wrap things up. There were closing remarks, quick summaries, polite smiles. But the energy didn't reset completely. Viewers could tell that something had shifted beneath the surface, that the exchange would linger long after the cameras stopped rolling. Joy took a breath before the next segment began. She glanced briefly at Greg, not with irritation, but with something closer to acknowledgement. Greg returned the look with a small nod, a silent recognition that the conversation, while uncomfortable, had been necessary. The show moved forward, as it always did. New topics, new jokes, new applause cues. Yet for those watching closely, part one of that exchange stood out, not because of volume or drama, but because of restraint. Because two strong voices had collided, not in chaos, but in clarity. And somewhere between the lights, the cameras, and the live audience, a familiar narrative had been challenged, quietly, deliberately, leaving everyone to decide what they would do with it next.